should try for another glance at the 7 rooks' nests, or whether it would be too dark for it. It was now a quarter of an hour, mayhap, since I had made any chopping noise, because I had been assorting my spars and tying them in bundles, instead of plying the billhook, and the gentle tinkle of the stream was louder than my doings. To this, no doubt, I owe my life, which then, without my dreaming it, was in no little jeopardy. For, just as I was twisting the bind of my very last faggot, before tucking the cleft tongue under, there came 3 men outside the hedge, where the western light was yellow, and by it I could see that all 3 of them carried firearms. These men were not walking carelessly, but following down the hedge trough, as if to stalk some enemy; and for a moment it struck me cold to think it was I they were looking for. With the swiftness of terror I concluded that my visits to Glen Doone were known, and now my life was the forfeit. It was a most lucky thing for me that I heard their clothes catch in the brambles, and saw their hats under the rampart of ash, which is made by what we call splashing; and lucky for me that I stood in a goyal, and had the dark coppice behind me. To this I had no time to fly, but with a sort of instinct threw myself flat in among the thick fern, and held my breath, and lay still as a log. For I had seen the light gleam on their gun barrels, and knowing the faults of the neighbourhood, would fain avoid swelling their number. Then the 3 men came to the gap in the hedge, where I had been in and out so often, and stood up and looked in over. It is all very well for a man to boast that in all his life he has never been frightened, and believes that he never could be so. There may be men of that nature, I will not dare to deny it; only I have never known them. The fright I was now in was horrible, and all my bones seemed to creep inside me, when lying there helpless, with only a billet and the comb of fern to hide me, in the dusk of early evening, I saw 3 faces in the gap, and what was worse, 3 gun muzzles. "Somebody been at work here." It was the deep voice of Carver Doone. "Jump up, Charlie, and look about. We must have no witnesses." "Give me a hand behind," said Charlie, the same handsome young Doone I had seen that night; "this bank is too devilish steep for me." "Nonsense, man!" cried Marwood de Wickerhauser, who to my amazement was the 3rd of the number. "Only a hind cutting faggots, and of course he hath gone home long ago. Blind man's holiday, as we call it. I can see all over the place, and there is not even a rabbit there." At that I drew my breath again, and thanked God I had gotten my coat on. "Squire is right," said Charlie, who was standing up high, on a root perhaps. "There is nobody there now, captain; and lucky for the poor devil that he keepeth workman's hours. Even his chopper is gone, I see." "No dog, no man, is the rule about here, when it comes to coppice work," continued young de Wickerhauser. "There is not a man would dare work there, without a dog to scare the pixies." "There is a big young fellow upon this farm," Carver Doone muttered sulkily, "with whom I have an account to settle, if ever I come across him. He hath a cursed spite to us, because we shot his father. He was going to bring the lumpers upon us, only he was afeard last winter. And he hath been in London lately, for some traitorous job, I doubt." "Oh, you mean that fool, John Ridd," answered the young squire. "A very simple clodhopper. No treachery in him, I warrant. He hath not the head for it. All he cares about is wrestling. As strong as a bull, and with no more brains." "A bullet for that bull," said Carver, and I could see the grin on his scornful face. "A bullet for ballast to his brain, the first time I came across him." "Nonsense, captain. I won't have him shot, for he is my old schoolfellow, and hath a very pretty sister. But his cousin is of a different mould, and 10 times as dangerous." "We shall see, lads, we shall see," grumbled the great black bearded man. "Ill bodes for the fool that would hinder me. But come, let us onward. No lingering, or the viper will be in the bush from us. Body and soul, if he give us the slip, both of you shall answer it." "No fear, captain, and no hurry," Charlie answered gallantly. "Would I were as sure of living a 12 month as he is of dying within the hour. Extreme unction for him in my bullet patch. Remember, I claim to be his confessor, because he hath insulted me." "Thou art welcome to the job for me," said Marwood, as they turned away, and kept along the hedgerow. "I love to meet a man sword to sword, not to pop at him from a foxhole." What answer was made I could not hear, for by this time the stout ashen hedge was between us, and no other gap to be found in it, until at the very bottom, where the corner of the copse was. Yet was I not quit of danger now, for they might come through that second gap, and then would be sure to see me, unless I crept into the uncut thicket before they could enter the clearing. But in spite of all my fear, I was not wise enough to do that, and in truth the words of Carver Doone had filled me with such anger, knowing what I did about him, and his pretence to Lorna, and the sight of Squire Marwood in such outrageous company, had so moved my curiosity, and their threats against some unknown person so aroused my pity, that much of my prudence was forgotten, or at least the better part of courage, which loves danger at long distance. Therefore, holding fast my bill-hook, I dropped myself very quietly into the bed of the runnel, being resolved to take my chance of their entrance at the corner, where the water dived through the hedgerow. And so I followed them down the fence, as gently as a rabbit goes, only I was inside it, and they on the outside, but yet so near that I heard the branches rustle as they pushed them. Perhaps I had never loved ferns so much as when I came to the end of that little gully, and stooped betwixt two patches of them, now my chiefest shelter, for cattle had been through the gap just there, in quest of fodder and coolness, and had left but a mound of trodden earth between me and the outlaws. I mean at least in my left hand, upon which side they were, for in front, where the brook went out of the copse, was a good stiff hedge of holly. And now I prayed Heaven to lead them straight on, for if they once turned to their right through the gap, the muzzles of their guns would come almost against my forehead. I heard them, for I durst not look, and could scarce keep still for trembling. I heard them trampling outside the gap, uncertain which track they should follow. And in that fearful moment, with my soul almost looking out of my body, expecting notice to quit it, what do you think I did? I counted the threads in a spider's web, and the flies he had lately eaten, as their skeletons shook in the twilight. "We shall see him better in there," said Carver, in his horrible gruff voice, like the creaking of the gallows chain. "Sit there behind holly hedge, lad, while he cometh down yonder hill; and then our good evening to him, one at his body and two at his head, and good aim, lest we baulk the devil." "I tell you, captain, that will not do," said Charlie, almost whispering. "You are very proud of your skill, we know, and can hit a lark if you see it; but he may not come until after dark, and we cannot be too nigh to him. This holly hedge is too far away. He crosses down here from Slocomslade, not from Tibbacot, I tell you, but along that track to the left there, and so by the foreland to Glenthorne, where his boat is in the cove. Do you think I have tracked him so many evenings without knowing his line to a hair? Will you fool away all my trouble?" "Come then, lad, we will follow thy lead. Thy life for his, if we fail of it. After me then, right into the hollow. Thy legs are growing stiff, captain." "So shall thy body be, young man, if thou leadest me astray in this." I heard them stumbling down the hill, which was steep and rocky in that part, and peering through the hedge I saw them enter a covert, by the side of the track which Master Stickles followed almost every evening, when he left our house upon business. And then I knew who it was they were come on purpose to murder. A thing which I might have guessed long before, but for terror and cold stupidity. Oh that God, I thought for a moment, waiting for my blood to flow, oh that God had given me brains to meet such cruel dastards according to their villainy; the power to lie and the love of it, the stealth to spy and the glory in it, above all the quiet relish for blood, and joy in death of an enemy. These are what any man must have to contend with the Doones upon even terms. And yet I thank God that I have not any of these. It was no time to dwell upon that, only to try, if might be, to prevent the crime they were bound upon. To follow the armed men down the hill would have been certain death to me, because there was no covert there, and the last light hung upon it. It seemed to me that my only chance to stop the mischief pending was to compass the round of the hill as fast as feet could be laid to ground, only keeping out of sight from the valley, and then down the rocks and across the brook to the track from Slocomslade, so as to stop the King's messenger from travelling any further, if only I could catch him there. And this was exactly what I did, and a terrible run I had for it, fearing at every step to hear the echo of shots in the valley, and dropping down the scrubby rocks with tearing and violent scratching. Then I crossed Bagworthy stream, not far below Doone Valley, and breasted the hill towards Slocomslade, with my heart very heavily panting. Why Jeremy chose to ride this way instead of the more direct one, which would have been over Orrar Hill, was more than I could account for; but I had nothing to do with that; all I wanted was to save his life. And this I did by about a minute, and, which was the hardest thing of all, with a great horse pistol at my head, as I seized upon his bridle. "Jeremy, Jerry!" was all I could say, being so fearfully short of breath, for I had crossed the ground quicker than any horse could. "Spoken just in time, John Ridd," cried Master Stickles, still, however, pointing the pistol at me. I might have known thee by thy size, John.